In 1984, buried deep beneath the Ural Mountains, the Soviet Union activated something unlike anything the world had ever seen. A machine, a nuclear command system, an artificial intelligence that, if left unchecked, could have ended human civilization without a single human being pressing a button. They called it Dead Hand.
In the case of nuclear or radiological fallout.
You're watching Night Nuke.
The Cold War was defined by tension, paranoia, and above all the idea that one mistake could lead to total nuclear annihilation. But while the United States placed its trust in human command, the Soviets built something else, something terrifying. To understand why the Soviets would create such a terrifying system, we need to go back to the early days of the Cold War and the doctrine that defined nuclear strategy, mutually assured destruction, or MAD. The concept was simple but horrifying. If either superpower launched a nuclear attack, both nations would be completely annihilated. It was a delicate balance of terror that kept the peace, but it had one massive flaw. What if one side's leadership was eliminated before they could retaliate? This wasn't just theoretical paranoia. By the 1970s, both the US and Soviet Union had developed increasingly sophisticated nuclear weapons and delivery systems. The Americans had Minuteman missiles that could strike Soviet targets within 30 minutes of launch. They had submarine-launched ballistic missiles that could appear out of nowhere. Most terrifying of all, they had what military strategists called decapitation strike capability, the ability to eliminate Soviet leadership so quickly that no retaliation order could be given. Soviet military planners lay awake at night wondering what if an American first strike eliminated the Politburo, the military command structure, and all communication systems before anyone could press the big red button. The entire Soviet nuclear deterrent would become useless, leaving the USSR defenseless against total annihilation. And so, in the depths of the Cold War, Soviet engineers began working on a solution, an automated system that would ensure retaliation even if every single person in the Soviet leadership was dead. For years, the existence of Dead Hand remained in the realm of rumor and speculation. Western intelligence agencies caught whispers of something called perimeter in intercepted communications, but concrete details were impossible to come by. The Soviets weren't exactly advertising their doomsday device in Pravda. The first real breakthrough came in the 1990s, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, when Russian military officials began speaking more openly about previously classified programs. But even then, the information was contradictory and incomplete. Some sources claimed the system was fully operational. Others insisted it was just a research project that never left the drawing board. Dr. Bruce Blair, a former Minuteman missile launch officer who became one of the world's leading nuclear weapons experts, spent years trying to piece together the truth about Dead Hand. In interviews with former Soviet officials, he began to uncover disturbing details about the system's capabilities.
Finally, they directly linked the top-level command posts to the missile launch equipment in the field so that they could bypass all humans down the chain of command. They even went so far as to build an elaborate launch apparatus in order to ensure semi-automatic nuclear retaliation in the event of a US strike that decapitated their top leadership.
According to Blair's research, and later confirmed by former Soviet officials, Dead Hand wasn't just a single computer sitting in a bunker somewhere. It was designed to lie semi-dormant until switched on by a high official in a crisis. Then it would begin monitoring a network of seismic, radiation, and communication sensors spread across the entire Soviet Union. The system was designed to detect signs of nuclear attack, but critically, it required human activation first. But here's where it gets truly terrifying. If Dead Hand determined that the Soviet Union was under nuclear attack and that the leadership had been eliminated, it would automatically begin the launch sequence for every nuclear weapon in the Soviet arsenal. Thousands of intercontinental ballistic missiles, submarine-launched ballistic missiles, and intermediate-range nuclear weapons would fire simultaneously, turning the Northern Hemisphere into a radioactive wasteland. In 2009, when investigative journalist David E. Hoffman published The Dead Hand, the untold story of the Cold War arms race and its dangerous legacy. The book, which won the 2010 Pulitzer Prize for General Nonfiction, was based on extensive research including access to secret Kremlin documents and interviews with former Soviet officials. One of Hoffman's most important sources was Valery Yarynich, a former colonel in the Soviet Strategic Rocket Forces who had worked directly on the perimeter system. In a series of interviews, Yarynich confirmed many of the details that had been speculation for years and revealed new information that was even more unsettling. According to Yarynich, the perimeter system became operational sometime in the late 1980s. The system remained on combat duty for periods of high tension, meaning that it could be activated if Soviet leadership believed a nuclear attack was imminent. But Yarynich also revealed something that sent shockwaves through the nuclear policy community. The system had experienced several false alarms over the years. Incidents where they had come dangerously close to interpreting natural phenomena or equipment malfunctions as evidence of nuclear attack. Deadhan was not fully automatic. It required activation by high-level officials. Once activated, however, it would monitor seismic, light, radioactivity, and overpressure sensors to detect nuclear detonations. Deadhan wasn't programmed with simple if-then statements like, if Moscow is destroyed, launch missiles. Instead, it used a complex algorithm that analyzed multiple inputs, radiation levels, seismic activity, electromagnetic pulses from nuclear detonations, loss of communication with command centers, and even atmospheric pressure changes that would indicate widespread destruction. The system had multiple fail-safes to prevent accidental activation, but once it determined that the Soviet Union was under attack and that human leadership was incapacitated, nothing could stop the retaliation. No human input was required, no codes needed to be entered, no keys turned. Deadhan would simply execute its programming and end civilization as we know it. As we entered the 21st century, a new question began to emerge. Was Deadhan still operational? The Soviet Union had collapsed, the Cold War was over, and Russia and the United States were supposedly cooperating on nuclear disarmament. But the answer remained unclear, with Russian officials providing ambiguous responses to direct questions about the system's status. Various reports from defense analysts and journalists have suggested that Russia may have maintained and even upgraded aspects of the perimeter system. Decades after its creation, Deadhan continues to raise more questions than it resolves. We know from former Soviet officials that Deadhan was designed with multiple redundant systems, buried communication networks, and hardened bunkers that could survive direct nuclear attack. We know that it uses sophisticated sensors to monitor for signs of nuclear war, and that it's programmed to automatically launch nuclear weapons if it determines that the Soviet leadership has been eliminated. But we don't know exactly how the system makes these determinations, what its current operational parameters are, or whether the algorithms that control it have been updated to account for modern realities like cyber warfare, space-based weapons, or hypersonic missiles. We also don't know how many people, if any, have the authority to disable Deadhan in an emergency. Some sources suggest that only the Russian president has this capability, while others claim that the system is completely autonomous once activated, with no human override capability whatsoever. You might be wondering why this decades-old mystery matters today. After all, the Cold War is over. The Soviet Union collapsed more than 30 years ago, and we're living in a different world than the one that created Deadhan. But that's exactly why it matters so much. Deadhan was designed for a bipolar world where nuclear war meant a simple exchange between two superpowers. Today's nuclear landscape is far more complex, with multiple nuclear-armed nations, non-state actors, and emerging technologies that the system's designers never anticipated. These aren't just academic questions. Every day that Deadhan remains operational is another day that humanity's survival depends on the proper functioning of computers programmed decades ago by people who couldn't possibly have anticipated the world we live in today. What we've discovered is both fascinating and terrifying. A weapons system so advanced and so dangerous that it represents a fundamental threat to human survival. Deadhan isn't just a relic of the Cold War, it's a ticking time bomb buried beneath the surface of international relations. Its sensors constantly scanning for signs of nuclear war, its computers ready to end civilization at a moment's notice. The investigation into Deadhan isn't over. As long as this system potentially remains operational, researchers, journalists, and nuclear weapons experts will continue trying to understand its capabilities, its current status, and the risks it poses to global security. Because in the end, the most terrifying thing about Deadhan isn't what we know about it, it's what we still don't know. In a world where a computer program designed in the 1980s might still have the power to end human civilization, ignorance isn't bliss. It's a luxury we can no longer afford. Thanks for watching. One click from you can make a big difference. Like, share, and subscribe. It helps more than you know.